Hello everyone, I am Siddharthan. This is the 12th video in our complete Python course where we will be discussing about strings in Python. The previous video was about the different basic data types that we have in Python such as integers, floats, strings, boolean, etc. But there is more to strings that we need to discuss. So in this video, let's understand what are all the different ways that we can use strings and how you can assign strings, and also what are all the different operations that can be performed on the strings. So this will be the agenda for today's video, and let's get started. So here I'll be doing my coding part in Jupyter Notebook. So you can do this either in Jupyter or Colab or even your PyCharm or VS Code. So here I've just written a simple statement about string in the text cell that says a string is a sequence of characters enclosed within single quotes or double quotes. So the single quotes or double quotes is the main thing here. So whenever you put something in either single quotes or double quotes, that would be considered as string in Python. It can be a combination of alphabets, or it can be a combination of alphabets and numbers, or it can be just numbers that's enclosed within quotes or double quotes. So we consider as that as a string. So let's start with a very basic example. So for that, I'll just convert this code cell into a text cell. So either you can do that by clicking somewhere outside the square brackets, press M. So this would convert this into a text cell instead of a code cell. If you press Y, that would convert this back to a code cell, or you can select the cell, go to this drop down and select markdown. So now this would become a text cell. So here I'm going to say this as basic string examples. So let's consider, or let's start with simple examples. Let's say that name is equal to Python. So here I'm creating a variable called as name and assigning it the string called as Python. As you can see, I've enclosed this word Python in double quotes. So this would be considered as a string. And then I'll create another variable called as language is equal to programming. If you notice, this programming word is present within single quotes. So previously this name value is present in double quotes, whereas the variable language we are using single quotes, but this doesn't make any change. Both these things represent string. So later you can print this strings. So I'm printing this using this variable. So here I'm going to say print language and run this. So it would say Python programming. So this is how you can assign string values to variables. So it's not only for alphabets, but you can also do this for numerical values as well. So let me create a variable called as num, and instead of saying 5, I'm just going to say 5 but within double quotes or single quotes, and then print this 5 by saying print num. So this would print 5, but the thing is this is not similar to saying num is equal to, let's say, num int is equal to 5, print num int. So in this case, right, so this num int, you can see the output is like the same in both the cases, but in this case this is an integer because we didn't put this within double quotes or single quotes. In this case we just like represented the number, but in the case of the previous num variable we have mentioned this within double quotes. So this would be considered as a string, whereas in this case this is considered as an integer. If you want to understand the data type, you can just simply say print type of num. This would say this belongs to the class string or the object string. So this num variable, if you do the same thing, but for this variable num int, this is going to say it belongs to the object integer because we didn't put this in double quotes or single quotes. So this thing is same for float as well. If you put a float value or a decimal value without quotes, then it is considered as a float data point. But if you enclose those float value within double quotes or single quotes, then it's considered as a string. So this is like a very basic example of how you can assign string values to a variable, right? And the next example that we see is about multi-line string. So I'll create a comment here and say this as multi-line string. Okay, and let's work on this. And maybe before this you can also check the type of this variable as well. So you can just say type or print type, both works. If you just say type, it won't print you this class thing. So here I'll say name, type of name. So I'm checking what's the data type of this variable name. So it says string, str represents string. And if you put a print statement, it would say class of string. So nothing much complex about it. So now let's see how we can create strings in multiple lines. So here we have just like single word, but what if we have a statement, or what if we have multiple statements in multiple line? In that case, what we can do is just say, let's say a is the string that we are considering, and here or the variable in which we are going to store the string. You can either use three double quotes or three single quotes to enclose this. So let's say that I'm creating three single quotes, so it's going to create another closing quotes. So these first three are starting double quotes, these threes are like ending quotes. So whatever the string should be present like within this particular space. And the other thing about Jupyter is like when you type a quote, the closing quote is also automatically typed. When you open a parenthesis, it's automatically closed, but you need to enable that from the settings and choose this auto close brackets. If you this auto close brackets is not enabled, then you have to manually open and close your parentheses or your quotes. So that's another thing that you can remember. So here I'll create like uh, three sets of double quotes, and here I'll say I love programming, right? And I'm going to press enter. This is going to go to the next line, and it's going to say Python is my favorite language. And maybe next like some random statements, like let's say machine learning uses Python. Let's say that this is the multi-line string that we have. So here, as you can see, instead of one double quote or one single quote, we have used three double quotes at the start and three double quotes at the end. So this is how you can write multiple line strings, and then you can just print this A, and then you can also print the type of A. So the result is also in multi-line, as you can see. So the type is string, but this won't work if you just put a single quote, because when you put a single quote here, right, so that's only for this particular line. So it won't consider the next line at all. So whenever you're using single quote, that's only for like single line statements like this, but you cannot use that for multiple lines. So instead you can just use three double quotes or three single quotes. This can also be done with single quotes. I'll show you this to you. So here we have three starting single quotes, but it should again end with single quotes only. You shouldn't start something with single quotes and end it with double quotes like this. So this should also be single quotes, the ending one. So similarly in this case as well, right? So when you start with a double quote, it should end with a double quote as well. When you start with a single quote, it should also end with a single quote as well. So that's another critical thing. So this is the same multi-line string, nothing different about the value there. Only difference is that here we are using a single quote combination. So now I'll run this and it would just print the same thing, and here again you can check the type and it's going to say it is also string. So that's how you can work with this simple string statements. So the next concept that we are going to discuss is how you can access individual string values. So let's say that maybe I'll explain this to you. So here I'll create a text cell and say accessing string characters. Okay, so this is the next thing that we are going to discuss. And here I'll say, let's say text is the variable that we are creating, and in this text let's have the value as Python. Okay, so now I'll run this. So now this variable has the value of Python, and we are going to access the individual letters in this text. So here I can say print of text of 0. So when I say text of 0, it's going to print P. And when I do the same thing but change this value to 1, it's going to print Y. So what happens here is, this is what we call as indexing. I'll maybe create another text cell and do this. So basically Python uses zero based indexing. So that means you start counting with 0, not with 1. So you don't start counting like 1 2 3. So you start with 0 1 2 3 and so on. So what would happen is, if you consider this word Python, right? So when I say Python, this is for the programming language, but here we have considered the variable value as Python. So what happens is, in this case, index 0 of Python would be the first letter, that is P. Okay, and index 1 would be the second letter Y, and so on. So this process kind of continues and so on. So this is a, you can individually access these individual characters or letters. So P would be my 0 index, Y will be my index number 1, T will be my index number 2, and so on. So this is how you can access these individual values like this. So we have text of 0, that means index 0, which represents this P, and text of 1, this is what we have, and so on. So this is how you can access the individual characters, and then you can also store this as well. So let's say that I'm creating, let's say, a variable called as car for character, and say that text of let's say 1. So text of 1 is nothing but Y, as we know, and later I'll print this character. So it would print this way. So similarly, you can access a particular character of a string and then you can assign it to a different variable as well. Or if you want to print the individual letters, you can use a for loop as well. So I can say for let's say a character, something like maybe let's do this as for letter in text. That means like for individual letters in text, print that letter. So it's going to say Python. So what happens here is, again, we will discuss about for loop later. I'll just like explain it to you in a simple way. So for when I say for letter in text, and the purpose of for loop is to repeat a particular task again and again for a set number of times. So when I say print letter, it's going to print one letter at a time. So when the for loop runs for the first time, this letter takes the first letter of text. So text is nothing but Python, right? So when the for loop runs for the first time, it's like saying letter is equal to P, just similar to this. So letter is equal to P, and then we are printing that letter. In the next iteration of this for loop, letter would take the value Y, and then we would print this Y and so on. So this is how you can access the individual characters of this string individually and print the individual letters using a for loop. Just some simple examples. So in this case, the iterator is a text. It's not some numbers, but we are iterating it over the text letters that we have in this variable called as text. So that is like one example. And the next concept that we'll be discussing is about string slicing. So this is another important concept, as we would be using this a lot in a lot of places, like not specifically, but in general, in some of the minor cases, we would use this string slicing a lot. So let's say that we have a text called as, again, these variables, these text values can be multi-word strings as well, even multi-line string as we have discussed. So here I'll just say hello, comma, world, and put a exclamatory mark here. So this is the string value that we have, hello comma world. Okay, let's run this. And now let's say that you want to count how many how many characters are there, or how many elements are there in this string. So for that, you can simply say for len, and within parenthesis pass the variable text. So len basically stands for length. So here we are trying to find the length of this text called as hello world. So when I run this, it's going to say 13. So that means there are 13 characters here. So H is my first character, second character, and so on. So if you count, you should even count this comma, and even you should count the space as well. So even space is considered as a character. So you shouldn't like leave out these things. So if you have this hello, right? So here we have totally 5 letters, and then comma is sixth one, space is 7, this is 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and this is the 13th one. So totally we have 13 letters here, right? If you count with indexing, as I've told you, indexing starts from 0. So this would be my index 0, this would be my index 1, 2, 3, and so on. As indexing started with 0, this won't be index 13, but this will be index 12. As we have started with 0, when you count until 2, you would totally have like 13 characters. So this would start with an index of 0 and it would end with an index of 12. So that's something that you can remember. So here we have the length of 13. So now we can slice the string to print individual substrings of this overall string. So let's see how we can do that. So I can say print text, which is the variable that has the string value, and I can say 0 and 5. So this would start with the index 0 and print whatever is between this 5, but it won't include this 5. I'll explain this to you. So when I run this, we have hello, right? If you consider the index, that's going to look something like this. So H would have the index of 0, E would have the index of 1, and let me maybe first like type this thing. So we have hello, and then we have a comma, and then we have a space here. So let me just mention space as just space, an empty space is there. And then we would have let's say W, O, R, L, and D. So these are all the different letters that we have, and this would have the value as 2, and this would have the value as 3 index value. So this would be 4, 5. Space would take the index of 6, and this would take the index 7, 8, 9, and 10, 11, and then we have exclamatory mark that takes the index 12. So let me just put a space so that it comes in a different line. So this is critical, so that's why I'm trying to spend a lot of time here. So if you understand this indexing, then you can understand like all the slicing that we are going to do. So totally there are like 13 elements here. So the indexing starts with 0. So when you say text of 0, it's going to print you H. When you say text of 1, it's going to print E, LO, and so on. And then we have this 5 for comma, 6 for space, 7, and so on. So now let's say that I want to print 0 colon 5. So now it's going to start with H0 and print all the way up to this. So when you have this 5, so this first number index value would be included and this last number won't be included. So that's very important. So what would happen is you would print whatever is between, or whatever the values are there between 0, 1, 2 and 3. So and 4 even, yeah. So because we totally have like 5 values, right, this 5 won't be included, so this will be excluded. So when you say 0 colon 5, that means it represents the values from index 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. It's very important to note that 5 won't be included at all here. So when you look at the string values here, we have 0, we have H1, we have E2, again L and so on, and until 4 we have this O, right? Fifth is comma, but if you see here, the comma is not included here, so that what happens. Now if you print this 0 colon 6, now what happens is you would have the values that belongs to these indices, right? So we have 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. In this case, 5 would be included, as 6 is the last number, but 6 won't be included at all. So now when you run this, you would get the value from allo and comma. So those are the things that will be printed here. So we have allo and comma. So this is how slicing works in Python, and the indexing as well works. So you can iterate over this a specific part of the string where this start index will be included, this ending index won't be included. So that's how you can remember that. So there is another way of saying this. I can say print text, and instead of saying 0 colon 6, you can just say colon 6. So that's going to print from the first character, right? So this is the same way of saying text 0 colon 6, or just saying colon 6. So when there is no number there, it's considered that there is a 0 there. So you can just do this one by, instead of like mentioning 0, you can just say colon and 6. So that's one way. And the other one that we can maybe try is like, let's say when I say print 0 colon 6 again here, so we know that it's going to print from H2 HELLO, right? But if I just say text 1 colon 6, so that would have the values that has the index from 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Again, this 1 would be included, 6 won't be included at all. So instead of saying 0 colon 6, I have from 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So what happens is this would start from this E, print all the way up to this space, right? Because we are not starting with 0, but we are starting with 1 in this case. So when I run this, I would get this ELLO and comma, which is nothing but 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, as we have not included this 0. So this is another example. And if you want to print this entire string, right, so what you have to do is you can just say text 0 colon. You shouldn't say 0 colon 12, because when you say 0 colon 12, this is the 12th index, so this would be excluded, right? So you will see until like the letter D. So this would look like hello world. But if you want to print the entire string, you have to say like the last index plus 1. So the last index is 12, so you have to say 13, because if you put 12, this 12th index value, that is exclamatory mark, will be ignored here. So you have to say 0 colon 13. So this would print the entire string that says hello comma world. Or you can just remember that if you want to print the entire string value, just mention the length of the string. So here we have already found the length of the string. So length is different from index. Length basically counts, right, how many values are there. Again, in this case, in the case of this counting that we do here, 0 doesn't come as index. So this just tells you how many values are there, or how many characters are there. So totally this is 13 characters, but when you consider as index, we start with 0, right? So when you want to print the entire string, just mention 0 colon 13, or the length of the string, right? Or the other way would be to just say 0 print 0 colon. So instead of saying 13, I can say length of text, because it say that I don't want to count how many letters are there in this text. I directly want to print all those things. So I can just say text of 0 colon length of text. So this is like other way. And the other thing that we can try is you can just say text 0 colon without any number. So if you don't mention any number, it's again similar to saying like length of entire text, or I want to print the entire text. So the value in this case would be 13, just similar to what we have seen here. When you don't have any value here, so here it's considered as 0, but when you don't have any value here, that's like max of the length of the string. In this case, it's going to consider the value as 13. So this is how the string slicing works here. And like there are like other variations that you can try this out. So I can say text of 7, so that's going to start from 7th index, and my 7th index is going to be my W, and it would include all the way up to this exclamatory mark, right? Because I didn't mention any word, so it would have the value as world. And you can also step some of the values or skip some of the values. So if I say something like, let's say uh, print text of colon 2, that means it's going to start with 0, it's going to end with 13. Maybe I'll just mention this as well. So this is my starting index, this is my ending index. So basically I want to print all the words, but here I have a step. So what happens is it will try to print this entire string, but all the alternate characters will be ignored. So my E won't be there, my O won't be there, and so on. So let's try to print this. So we have H L O O L. So what happens is we print this H, skip the next step, print this L, skip this next L, print this O, and skip this command, so on. So this process goes on. So we have a step of 2. So you can have like any number of steps. So even you can skip 3. So every second character will be skipped, and we have this H, L, space, and R. So what happens here is like we print H, E and L will be skipped, and the third character will be printed, and then these three things will be skipped, and the next multiple of 3 will be printed. So if you consider this, right, so when you have 3, the third multiple, so we print this 0, the third multiple, this is printed, space is printed, R is printed, and so on. So you can similarly consider that for 2 as well. So when you have 2, 0 would be printed, the second multiple, L is printed, O is printed, space, 2 multiples, all those 2 multiples are printed. So this is how you can step through a particular value of string. Let's say that you want to access the last letter of the string. So there are two ways to do that. So you can either say print text of, let's say 12 is the last index, right? So you can do that, and it's going to print the last value. Or the other way would be to slice that and print it. So you can do that by saying -1 colon. So when you say -1, it's going to represent the last string value that you have, which is the exclamatory mark. So this is just accessing it using index, but this is like printing the last character but by slicing it. So we are slicing to only have the last letter of the string. So this is about it. And if you want to simply reverse the string, you can use something like this. So I can say text 0 colon 13, the entire length, and put another colon, and here say -1. So this is going to reverse your entire string. So I want to print all those words, right? So that's what 0 to 13 means, but I want to reverse that. So that's what this step of -1 means. So this reverse the string text, right? So we have the variable text, right? So when I print this, it's going to, sorry, one second, print text of 0 colon 13. So sorry, I have to say something like this, remove these two things. So don't mention that 0 to 13. So when we don't mention that, that means like I want to print all those things, but I want to reverse that string. So I can say -1. So these are some of the string slicing. So this is how you can access the individual characters by mentioning the index value, or you can slice this by using this colon and mention the starting index and the ending index. And we have to note that starting index value is included, but the ending index value is not included. And we have also seen how you can just mention the ending index value alone, or just the starting index value alone, slice specific parts of string, do stepping functions, and so on, and finally reverse a string. So these are some of the aspects. So now let's discuss about some of the string operations or the methods that we can perform on the string, and let's call this as string methods. So one of the basic methods which we have already discussed is like length of strings. So here I can say length of allow. So here, instead of putting this in a variable, I'm just like directly finding the length of this string allow, and it's going to say 5. You can do this, or you can also print this, so that doesn't make any difference. So here we would have the value as 5. So when you are using any IDEs, this length of allow may not give you output, so you have to use the print statements. So maybe here as well you can use the print statement itself, which basically tells you the number of letters that you have. Again, this is not corresponding to the index, but this is depending on the count of the letters. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we have 5 letters, so it says the value as 5. And then what you can do is you can do something like this, allow dot upper, open and close parenthesis. So this is going to give your value like this. So it's going to convert all the letters into uppercase letters. You can either do this way, or you can put this allow in a variable as well, and then say, let's say b is equal to, you know, a dot upper, and then print b. So this, what happens is, now a is still in lowercase letters, but what happens is we are taking this a, converting all the characters to uppercase letters and storing it in b. So we are not altering the original a, right? So we are just like converting that and storing this in a variable called as b, and then we are like printing it. So this is how you can convert, you know, the string that has lowercase letters into uppercase letter. Or you can also do something similar to this, and then you can say, instead of saying b is equal to a dot upper, you can say a is equal to a dot upper and print this a. So this is going to say hello. And here there is a very critical point to note. Here we are not editing the original a value. Here we are creating a new value or a new variable, converting these letters into uppercase letter, and then we are storing it to the same variable. This is not same as editing this value, because strings are immutable. So here maybe I'll mention this, immutable. That means you cannot edit a string value once it has been declared or once it has been created. So I cannot edit the original a value that has the value as allow in lowercase letters. But what I'm doing here is, here I'm not editing the original a value. I'm converting all this to a uppercase letters and creating a new variable with the same name as a, and then storing this. So this is very important in the concept of mutability and immutability, where some data types are mutable, like list, which again we will discuss later. But you know, data types like integers, floats, and strings are immutable. So here we are not editing it, but just converting it to uppercase letter and storing it in a different variable. This is just similar to this, creating a new variable as b and converting uppercase letter and storing it in b. In this case, we are just like using the same variable name. But don't assume that this is editing these values. So we cannot do that, as strings are immutable. So this is another example. And then you can like consider like other functions as well. So here this is uppercase letters for converting it into uppercase letters, and then we can also convert like you know, letters that are in let's say this is uppercase letters, and then we can use the method called as lower, and that's going to convert all the uppercase letters into lowercase letters, and then we can print this. And then we can maybe use something like print hello world, and I'm going to say dot string dot capitalize, and don't forget to mention your opening and closing parenthesis. So that's going to capitalize your first letter. So that means it's going to make your first letter in uppercase letter. So all the case just remains as it is. And the other is, you can use something like hello world, instead of capitalize, say title. So we know that title, all the individual words are in uppercase letters. So this H and W alone are kind of converted into uppercase letters. And then you can also use something like this. So let's say that we have a string value that says hello, but that has like, let's say 3 spaces at the right side. So you can use the strip method or the strip function, put a parenthesis. When you print it, it's going to remove that, you know, spaces that you have. Maybe I'll just show you like this. So when I say hello and put this in quotes and just leave 3 space here, and let's call this a, and then let's just say a. So when I say print, it's, you won't be able to see the spaces because we don't know where we have this closing brackets. But instead of print a, if you just say a, you will see that it's enclosed in single quotes or double quotes, right? So now when I use a strip, right, so when I say a dot a is equal to a dot strip, open and close parenthesis, and now print your a. Sorry, this is yes, so I have to mention a. So it's going to say hello. So now this trailing spaces are not there. So that's how we can use strip in order to remove the empty spaces that's present. Okay, so these are all some of the examples. And other few things that you have are, let's say that we have 2 strings. So the first string is, you know, hello, and the second string is world. So these are the 2 strings that we have. So if you want to concatenate these 2 strings, or basically join these 2 strings, you can just simply say first plus second. So that's going to combine these 2 strings, and then you can just print this result. But when you concatenate these two strings, it's not going to add any space between them. So you would see hello world. If you want a space, either include it here or include it here. So you would say hello world, or even you can do this. So instead of saying this result is equal to first plus second, here you can insert another string, concatenate another string, which basically has opening and closing double quotes, and within that I am a string. So what happens is, first we have this hello, and to this hello we add a space as mentioned here, and then combine the second word, which is hello world. So this is going to add a space here. So this is how you can concatenate this string. And this is, maybe I'll mention the name of this. So this is string concatenation. So the next one is string multiplication. So let's say that I have a string called as Python, and I want to print this Python, let's say 3 times. So here I can say print uh, text asterisk symbol, which is for multiplication in Python, and say 3. So that's going to print the word Python 3 times. If you want a space between them, you can just add a space here after Python. So that's going to add a space between them. So if you want to print this in a new line, right, so you can put a new line character. So you can, instead of the space, put backspace in. So that's going to print this 3 times, as but we have new line, so each of these words will be printed in a new line. So this is how we can do string multiplication. And then we have discussed about this concept of string immutability, right? So let's understand that as well. Let's say that strings are immutable. So I'll explain this to you. Let's say that we have a variable called as text that has a string value of hello. Let's try to change the specific value. Let's say that I'm saying text of 0. So instead of h in the first letter of the string, so I'm accessing that with text of 0. I want to replace this with the value k. When I run this, this is throwing an error. It says string object does not support item assignment, or it's like another way of saying you cannot assign the value k to this particular index value. This is possible in the case of data types like string, where once you have, data types like list, where in list, let's say you have 5 values, you can replace the first value with a different value, because lists are mutable. You can edit some values in the list, but in the case of strings, we cannot assign a new value to that string because strings are immutable. So let me just say this as, this will raise an error as strings are immutable. So you cannot edit specific letter of a string once it has been created, or you cannot like change a particular, delete a letter or edit letter with some other letters. So that's not possible with string. So that's one thing. And then the other concept is like the string formatting, which we have already discussed before. I'll just like take a simple example, as we have seen this already. So let's say that we have name as John and age is 30. Let's say that we want to insert these values specifically. Instead of concatenation, you can do concatenation as well, as we have done here, but there is a concept of f string that's like widely used, and it's like much easier to do. So here I can say my name is curly braces, I'm going to say name, and I am age years old. Let's run this. So it says my name is John and I'm 30 years old. So what happens is, here we have variable and named it as name, that has the value John, and the age that has the value of 30. So here I'm saying my name is name. So that means when I use a f string, I can put something in curly braces. So this part would be replaced with this variable value. So in this case, the variable is name, right? So this part will be replaced by this name variable value, that is John. And curly braces of age, this will be replaced with the age value of 30, and we are just like printing this. So this is how you can use f string in order to insert specific substrings into a different string. So these are all some of the different string operations that we do. Again, there are like lot more than this, but these are some of the basic stuff that should be good for you to get started with. uh, you can also see like what are all the different methods that you have, and different functions that you can perform on the string to just get a better understanding, but these should be good for now. So we have just started with basic string examples, and we have also seen how numbers can also be considered as string when you use double quotes. And the next topic is like multi-line string using double quotes and single quotes. And also we have discussed a lot about this indexing, how this indexing works, and also slice specific parts of string, and also use like step number as well, reverse a string, and so on. And then we have also seen how you can convert all the lowercase letters to uppercase letters, and lower uppercase letters to lowercase letters, capitalize, title way, strip that removes the space, and so on. And then we have discussed some of the operations like string concatenation, multiplication, and we have also discussed about immutability and f strings. So I hope everyone is clear with whatever we have discussed today. So please practice these codes and try to get hang of it. So you may forget like few things at start, but like once you start practicing it, like did this a few times, you would get like a better understanding and remembrance for this. So that is all I wanted to discuss today. So I'll see you in the next upload. Thanks for watching.